Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining this first webinar of the UserGroup Microsoft 365 Maturity and Governance. In this first webinar, we want to give you an overview of Microsoft 365 Maturity and Governance. And as I said, it's the first webinar of the user group, so we are excited. But before we begin, I have a couple of notes. I got a question several times. Are we recording? Yes, of course, we are recording. And we'll be sharing the links to video and slides in 1 to 2 days after the webinar. If you're not a member of the user group yet, you can apply. We're always happy to get new members. I'm going to paste in the link to the user group where you can apply the chat. We will answer questions at the end. So you can use the Q&A section for questions. That's the little Q&A question mark next to the chat, the top of the Teams window. If you have any ideas for future webinar topics that you would like to see, would like us to talk about, then please tell us in the chat. We are always happy to get new ideas for new webinars. Okay, so let's have a look at the agenda. We are covering 2 topics today. We're talking about an overview of the maturity models around Microsoft 365. I'm going to talk about the maturity model for Microsoft 365, then about the Power Platform maturity model and the Power BI maturity model. And Michael is then going to talk about the automation maturity model. Followed by Ryan. He's going to talk about governance and control of Power Platform, the concepts of good Power Platform governance. And he's going to give us an overview of practical Power Platform governance tools, like the COE Starter Kit, the SharePoint Knowledge Hub, and the Rencore Governance tool. Just in case you don't know me, my name is Peter Potrafky. I'm director of Pack of 7 here in Brisbane. I'm in the IT business for 30 years now, a long time, working in different roles, project manager, developer, consultant. I know SharePoint since 2001, when it was still called SharePoint Portal Server. And I know Microsoft 365 since 2011, 2012. Today, I am helping organizations to govern and control their Microsoft 365 environment. If you want to contact me, you can do that via the LinkedIn page or directly via email. We are not going to talk about Pack of 7 today. If you want to know more, you can contact me, Ryan, or Michael. We'll get in contact. So let's get into the first topic today, overview of the Microsoft 365 maturity model. So as we all know, Microsoft 365 is pretty feature-rich, means we can address a lot of business capabilities. So we somehow need to organize our thinking to take advantage of all those features. And the maturity model, wants to help us. So it gives us a systematic idea to map our business needs to more granular business capabilities and to create a strategic roadmap to get there and to implement it. Once implemented, we can then measure the success and make any adjustments if necessary. Let me say a few words about the pace, the speed. So typically we take a crawl, walk, and run approach. That means we take small steps towards larger goals. We break down the complex task into smaller, more manageable steps. That means we learn gradually rather than in one big step. So because it's just not possible with a platform of that size. So basically we slow and grow. We take the slow and grow approach. Okay, so it's a maturity model, but maturity of what exactly? So in maturity models, we talk about competencies and capabilities and levels. Competency is an area of organizational expertise that is business need oriented. So it's not technology oriented, it's business need oriented. That's important for the model to understand. Each of those competencies consist of several capabilities. So capability is a more granular business need oriented element of expertise. And the capabilities are the building blocks of each competency. The capabilities are organized in levels. A level is something that we use to measure how good a capability supports the organizational processes. And obviously, you want to get from lower levels to higher levels in everything we do with our capabilities. Yeah, so let's look at the levels. So we have 5 levels in the maturity model. Beginning with level 100, so it's 3 digits because we want to be able to so let's say if we are looking at a process or the organization as a whole, we want to be able to if we are between, for example, level 200 or level and level 300, we want to be able to give it a level of 250, 260. So you want to be a bit more precise. So that's why we have 3 digits here. Level 100 is the initial level, level 200 managed, 300 defined, 400 predictable, and then 500 optimizing. So basically, when you are at level 100, processes are completely people-driven and reactive. That means that people only respond to events, don't work proactively, so they only react. On level 200, people already know what they have to do. That's better. Level 300, the processes are defined and people follow them. At level 400, we check whether processes are followed and measure and improve the processes. And finally, at level 500, processes are permanently optimized. So let's have a look at the Microsoft 365 maturity model. So the maturity model for Microsoft 365 has 11 competencies, like business process competency, cognitive business competency, collaboration competency, communication competency, and so on. The list on the left. The goals of the model are to understand and compare options for solving business problems, obviously, to focus time, energy, and resources on the right priorities, to identify the budget and resources needed to move ahead, and to establish a baseline to show improvement over time. So you want to measure your improvement. You want to compare it to, for example, last year, this year, to see how the improvement goes. There is an official page for the model, so let's have a look. Page, there you go. So here we are with the Microsoft 365 model. There are several folders. The overview folder, well, overview gives us a overview of like a bunch of useful links. Stuff that I'm going to talk about anyway. But what I should mention is the practitioner sessions here. So the group that came up with the model for Microsoft 365, they are doing a monthly webinar. It's pretty interesting. And they put all their videos online. So when you click here, you see all the videos and you can watch them. Each video is about 1 hour long. And they put all the slides, the slide decks online. You can also download the slide decks. It's pretty nice. The first link is gives you a meeting invitation, so you can be part of the webinars. You can just attend, watch it live if you want to. So we recommend doing that because it's a great content. The second folder, introduction. It introduces the model, so it gives you the purpose of the model, gives you a little summary of the model, and then it describes the 5 levels again. Basically what I've done with the slide, the levels. There's nothing special. Then there is another link to the history of the model, beginning with the capability maturity model in 1986 up to 2018-19, and they started to think about the maturity model for Microsoft 365. All the other folders are basically describing the different competencies. Here, beginning with business process competency, cognitive business competency, collaboration competency, and so on. So when we go to collaboration competency, let's have a look at the content. So we see there is a little definition of the competency. There is the evolution of the competency over time. And then we are already at the level of the capabilities here. So we see level 100, little description of the level regarding Microsoft 365. And then we have a few categories here: governance, risk, compliance, and security. And there we have the capabilities. So that's the valuable stuff we are looking for. For example, in this category, we have 5 capabilities. Here, information architecture, 4 capabilities, and so on. When we go down, level 200, same categories, other capabilities, obviously. Level 300, again, level defined, description, then categories, and the capabilities here. What I should also mention is at the end of each level chapter here, there is a section called impacts. So impacts is describe how each level impacts the organization and the users. That's pretty useful if you do an assessment. You want to know what's our level, for example, for a specific process. You assess a specific process. You want to know what level. And you also look at the impacts. And you see, okay, that's the impact that we also see in our organization. So that must be the level we are on. Yeah, so each level has its own impacts. And we have 4 competencies here: collaboration, communication, people and communities, and staff and training, that have an elevation page. It's pretty useful. For example, collaboration here tells you how to get from level 100 to 200. So it's a bunch of ideas and actions and tasks that you can do to get from one level to the next. It's not only from 100 to 200, obviously. You scroll down. It's a lot of content, very helpful. Here from 200 to 300 and so on, 300 to 400. So it tells you exactly what to do to get to next levels. Really great stuff here. Yeah, let's look at an example of a capability across the levels. So now we dig a little bit deeper, go to the collaboration competency back, level 100. And we can, for example, look at this capability. While links can be emailed rather than the documents themselves, copies of documents still get attached to emails. So that's a typical form of how capabilities are defined. So it's pretty detailed, I would say, and it tells you really well what they mean with it. So in this case, let's go back to the slides. So I've taken this capability here: copies of documents still get attached to emails. That's about communicating documents, obviously. So how do we communicate documents in the organization? At level 100, you're actually using attachments. So that's how everybody starts. We just send attachments around. When you go to level 200 here, you see that links are shared or emailed rather than documents as attachments, starting to lead to one version of truth. So we are using links now in our emails. We don't use attachments anymore. So that's obviously better because you have the original document somewhere centralized and stored, and people only get links. So if you change the document, obviously everybody only looks at the original document, and there are not like hundreds of different versions of documents floating around in the organization. Level 3 or 300, we differentiate work in progress from approved. So that's where we begin to version documents, and we give documents a status. So that's level 300. Level 400 is we protect finalized versions from change. So that's where we begin to use workflows around documents. So in this case, for example, we are protecting the final version so that nobody can change it. So that's where we begin to use workflows around documents. And finally, level 500, content and task status are actively used to provide insights and trigger actions, including automation of downstream processes. So level 500, sophisticated, more stuff, just a longer form of the capability. So we start with automating and reports on the documents during the status changes, and we trigger downstream processes when status changes. So that's all about automating and reporting. So that's how capabilities evolve from one level to the next, and that's pretty typical for all maturity models actually, and for the capabilities. So yeah, the next question is now how do we use this model now in an actual initiative? So if you actually want to do something, we want to use the model. So the model itself suggests a 4-step workshop process, beginning with the so-called proposal. So we want to get approval for the initiative. That's where we start. So we want to get the approval. And in the second phase, then we can do initial workshops. So that's a helicopter view. We only look at competencies here. So we don't get into the details. We look at the competency level, and we do initial workshops, helicopter view. Third phase is follow-up workshops. That's the deep dive workshops. Here we look at the capabilities, so like one step deeper. And we are thinking about actions to take. So we not only look at the capabilities here, we also look at, okay, what do we actually have to do? What are the actions to implement those capabilities that we want in the next levels? The fourth phase here is the progress workshops phase, where we assess the progress of our project or initiative, and we adjust the roadmap if needed. Again, in a more simplified view, we start with the approval. We want to get the approval for the whole initiative. Then second step, we analyze competencies from the helicopter view. So that's the phase where we look at the competencies. The third phase, we have 2 steps. First, we analyze the capabilities. So that's where we look at capabilities. That's the deep dive workshops. And then we tailor and prioritize the capabilities here already. And followed by determining and estimating the actions for each capability. So that's where we actually think about what do we want to do to implement the capabilities. And important here is to mention that we also estimate here. So that's the first time we can actually estimate costs for the implementation. That's why we can here again reprioritize the capabilities, because now we know about the budget and the cost. So we can rethink about the capabilities and to reorder them maybe. And after that, we can then plan out the quick wins and the projects for each action that we want to implement. Result is obviously a proper roadmap with actions, budget, and timeline that we can then implement. So that's fine. What does the model not give us? So that's the model ends at the capability level. At least the content of the model ends at the capability level, and it leaves open the gap between the business-oriented capabilities and concrete actions. So it doesn't tell us concrete actions to take. So that's not part of the model. But in a real scenario, we obviously invest most of the time into figuring out the actions to implement the capabilities. And that's actually the most frequently asked question that we get from our clients. The question is, what do we actually have to do now? I mean, they all read about capabilities and competencies, but then they ask themselves, okay, what are the actual steps we want to take now? Unfortunately, it's not part of this webinar here, but I will talk about it in a separate webinar or video later this year, so if you're interested. Okay, so now we know about the Microsoft 365 model. The question is the concept limited to Microsoft 365? Obviously, the answer is no. Everything I've described so far about Microsoft 365 model, the concepts can be applied to other sets of competencies and capabilities. So what is another set? Let's look at it. Obviously, the Power Platform maturity model. Same structure. competencies and capabilities. We have 7 competencies here: strategy and vision, business value, admin and governance, support, nurture and makers, automation and fusion teams. The maturity model for Power Platform is part of the wider Power Platform adoption best practices, and Ryan is going to talk about that in a few minutes. And just like the Microsoft 365 model, we want to assess maturity and define a roadmap. So it's the same idea. There is also an official page. So let's have a look at that. Jump back to the browser. Power Platform adoption best practices, and inside there is the adoption maturity model here. Little overview, very tiny, just a few sentences. And then we have goals and opportunities. That's basically describing the different levels from the perspective of the Power Platform. And it gives you opportunities. So opportunities here is quick wins. When you say, okay, we are at level 100, we're just beginning, and you can look at the opportunities, and those are like quick wins, things, actions that you can immediately take. Here also for level 200, opportunities again, level 300, and so on. So it's always those opportunities. That's pretty handy. You can actually do tasks. The detailed capabilities are in the 3rd page. So this is the actual model. All on one page in this case for Power Platform. Here we have a competency, strategy, and vision with the 5 levels and with capabilities for each level, as we know it from the other model, from the Microsoft 365 model. Scroll down. Next competency here with the 5 levels and capabilities. Next competency, admin and governance, and so on, support, nurture and citizen makers, automation and fusion teams. So it's all on one page. Actually, the smallest model that we have. Maybe the automation model is a bit smaller even, but it's pretty tiny. Yeah, so that's the Power Platform model. So really simple. And then let's go to the Power BI maturity model to switch screens here. Okay, so that's the Power BI maturity model. Here we have 12 competencies on the left. See all the competencies. And that's the first time we see arrows between competencies. So what do they mean? An arrow means a source influences target. For example, the way we do business alignment influences the way we do governance. The way we do governance influences the way we do system oversight, and so on. It's a structure of competencies, and it shows us what influences what. The title tells us Power BI adoption roadmap. So it's not a roadmap for implementation. So it doesn't tell you, okay, implement this, implement that, and then this, and then this. It's rather a roadmap for the design of the implementation. So when you think about how to implement things, competencies, capabilities, when to do what, when you have this discussion, then you start with the data culture. You start thinking about the data culture. Then you go to the executive sponsor competency, and so on, until you end up with the change management competency, because change management is a competency that is only influenced by, in this case, 4 other competencies, but it doesn't influence anything else. So that's the last competency in the chain that you discuss. So it gives you more like a roadmap of how to think about how to design your implementation ideas. As I said, we have 12 competencies with extensive documentation, you will see, of adoption steps for each competency. And we have one general maturity area. I'm going to show you all of that in a minute. There's also an official page, and we are going to look at it now. That's this one. Okay, so here we have an overview again. So it shows us the exact image that I had on the slide. and it explains all the 12 different competencies here. It describes the levels again. Perspective is Power BI, obviously here. Level 100, little description. And then we already have capabilities here described. So this is the general capability part. It's not connected to any specific competency here, but it's a general set of capabilities for Power BI, for level 100, for level 200. So those are capabilities that we can already use in our model and in our implementation. And then we have all the different 12 competencies here. One folder or page per competency, for example, data culture, executive ownership, business alignment, and so on. When we look into data culture, for example, we have here a lot of content for the adoption to get an understanding of what data culture is and how the model looks at it. And then we have, in this case, for data culture, 4 different subcategories, beginning with data discovery. And at the end of data discovery, finally, we have, again, our 4 or 5 levels and the capabilities. So that's the stuff we can then use for our actual model to then think about the implementation. Same with data democratization here. It's just another subcategory of data culture. Again, at the end, we have capabilities and the levels. There is data literacy, same thing. Here you go, the levels and the capabilities. And then we have data culture at the end, again, with 5 levels and the capabilities. Yeah, so again, same situation. We have capabilities with, or competencies with capabilities that we can use for the maturity process to get to a proper roadmap, just like with the Power Platform and with Microsoft 365. Okay, so that was my introduction to these 3 maturity models for Microsoft 365, Power Platform, and Power BI. Now, Michael is going to talk about the 4th model in the series, the automation maturity model. Michael?
Thanks, Peter. I'll just switch over to my screen for all to see. Excellent. Hello, everyone. First to start, thanks, Peter, for the introduction to the maturity models. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Gourlay. I am the RPA team lead here at Pack 7 in sunny Brisbane today in Queensland. And my experience ranges from developing custom web apps, software, and then before I ended up diving into the Word or Power Platform, and then specifically into Power Automate and robotic process automation procedures. So today we're going to dive into, I'm going to briefly touch on the automation maturity levels in the Power Platform. So where do we start? I think it's a good starting point to identify a really strong automation adoption strategy. And so what I've got here today is some best practices that derive from Microsoft themselves and a bit of experience from ourselves at Pack 7. And so we're going to look at a set of tools and guidance. Essentially, these aid in your organization's adoption of your automation journey. It doesn't matter where you are. So if you're just starting out, using the Power Automate services, or you've already got a couple of workflows already in place, we can use these tools today to identify, your current state of your organization. So it is quite a larger topic. So I'm just going to briefly go over the maturity levels today, and then hopefully these eventually will allow you to scale your automation workflows across your organization. So the first one we're going to look at today is called HEAT. It's called a Holistic Enterprise Automation Techniques. So essentially, these are stages to aid in deploying and managing your automation projects. So these are users' guidance, and you can cater towards your organization goals, as I said before, no matter what stage you are in your automation journey. So I'm just going to touch briefly over each of them. So we've got Empower. So essentially, this is ground zero of your automation, ground zero of your project. So here you provide learning materials, research. You present what the capabilities, benefits you can get from automation to your key stakeholders, so to speak, in your organization. And then we want to move on to discover and plan. So this one's quite an important stage in the process. Here, essentially, what you do is you'll identify any current processes you have. So, for instance, maybe your HR department might have an onboarding procedure. You'd like to automate it. Here, you would identify this process, see if it could translate into an automation workflow. So here, you would identify key metrics. But I won't go too in depth today on that. But that is quite an important step. So we move into design and build and test. So here it's quite self-explanatory. You'll design your workflows, you build and test before you end up deploying these into like a production environment. And here you can monitor any of your automation that are running. And this is extremely important because you can get back any real-time information, and then you can use this to identify your key metrics. For instance, maybe a return on investment or your success areas in your automation. And then we'll finally run the end of the techniques called secure and govern and nurture. Essentially here you establish these guardrails so you can scale your automations across your teams and your organization. So what I mean by that is, you have policies and procedures in place. So it just keeps everything consistent in regards to your policies. So all this is just one set of techniques used to define your maturity levels. But we'll look at another in the next slide. So this may look familiar. So Peter briefly touched on this, well, not touched on this. Peter provided this template earlier in the webinar. Essentially, but this template is specific to your automation flows and procedures. So this is specific to how automate in your RPA. So essentially, we start at level 100 initial. So like I said before, this is ground zero, starting a journey. We want to get everyone on board to see the benefits of automation. And then as we move up and we progress, we get to repeatable, which is level 200. So essentially, at this stage, you would have multiple workflows running. Say, for instance, you would have an onboarding workflow already running in your HR department, and you're already seeing some kind of value returning. You're seeing that these are providing benefit and value, and you want to kind of grow that awareness to other teams potentially in your organization. That's where we get to defined, level 300. So essentially, this level identifies your organization as having multiple automations running. And here we have concrete guardrails. So what I mean by concrete guardrails is you have security and scale procedures in place so that every team in your organization follows these sets of standards. So as we get up to finally into level 400 capable, this one's quite important because this really focuses on monitoring our automations, so we can elevate our further automation projects. And then we have level 500 efficient. Essentially here we have multiple teams in your organization that are comfortable with deploying, running, building our automations, and we can go to each other for guidance if need be. So we have all these techniques, maturity models, we have the heat techniques. How do we actually implement these into our organization? I like to like to adopt best practices using an automation center of excellence. So this is also recommended and suggested by Microsoft. And here, the automation center of excellence allows you to scale your automation across your organization. So what it is essentially is a group of minded peers that you can help propel and implement these strategies going forward. For example, you can identify key roles who approve your workflows. So you can kind of have a high level overview of everything that's going on in your automations. And in that way, we can actually implement these heat and maturity models, to identify, optimize, and then guide our projects going forward. So why is the COE so important? Well, it's there to implement governance for all your automations across your Power Platform. It expands past just automation, though. So I will pass it on to Ryan to expand on the importance of this governance and how it's integral to driving innovation in your Power Platform environment.
Thank you very much, Michael. Let me just change this over. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Wilson. I've been in the IT industry for 8 years. I'm Microsoft certified, and I've been working across a wide range of projects. I do enjoy getting very technical, or as a tradie would say, I enjoy getting on the tools. And today I'm going to be talking to you about Power Platform governance. If you have any questions, be sure to send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, be sure to check out our YouTube channel. We've just recently started in the last month or two, and we're actually delivering quite a lot of content there lately. So I did a webinar recently with ACS on this exact topic, which would be a little bit more in depth than what I'm going to go into today. So be sure to check that out as well. Okay. So governance, what is governance? So essentially, in my opinion, governance is the most important topic in IT. And what we're finding today with all organizations across Australia, and even we've got a few clients in Europe as well, is that corporate governance is changing, and it's changing quite a lot. So typically, I'm sure you would be all familiar with the process. IT always say no, business always say yes. And now we're trying to find that middle ground between them. So there are 3 main pain points for IT, which we've found across our clients. The first one is data loss of business critical data. Second one, surprise licensing. So as you all know, with Microsoft, they always change costs, introduce new licensing, and that's always a headache to control. And the third point is that there's no control over the continuously growing amount of apps. So with the Power Platform, Microsoft have given business users the ability to go crazy with apps. And as the IT department, your job is to essentially make sure they can still do that and they have the flexibility to do that, but it's within your policies and they're following your guardrails and guidelines as well. So we want to try and change governance from this screaming or this battle and trying to find the middle ground so it's more of a handshake. Power Platform governance. It's outlined via the Microsoft adoption best practices. This is actually based on the maturity model for Power Platform. And it essentially just provides documentation, best practices and tools so that you can make informed decisions about the Power Platform and roadmap it out for your organization. Now, one thing to note is that governance never ends. It's a continuously evolving process, so it's never going to be finished. And it's the same with the Power Platform. Your strategy is going to change over time. Your vision is going to change, and it's your job or within the organization to make sure that you align yourselves as the vision and strategy changes over time. You might implement new tools. You might implement different sets of guardrails to make sure that your business employees are doing what they're meant to be doing. So the 4 main categories of the adoption best practices is strategy and vision. This is where you define the roles and responsibilities of your team. Admin and governance is where you implement your digital guardrails so that business users can create what they want to create while maintaining your organization's policies. Then you want to nurture and educate. This is where you provide a community for your organization. So you might provide a knowledge hub or a communication channel where they can talk with each other and uplift organically as well within the organization. And then finally, you want to support your organization. So this could be through learning events, app in a day, or hackathons, for example. Maybe you even provide them learning pathways to get Microsoft certified. So the Center of Excellence, as Michael touched on, essentially the Center of Excellence is an idea, and it's a group of documentation tools and people with different motives to govern and promote the Power Platform. Now, essentially, a lot of organizations start the Center of Excellence around the Power Platform. However, as your organization grows, this will expand. So you might have the automation team for what Michael was talking about. Then you might have Microsoft 365, so they control your teams or other Microsoft 365 services as well. And essentially, the Center of Excellence is there to build guardrails, to provide freedom for your makers, but also maintaining governance for your IT. So it provides leadership best practices, control, and also training as well. The Center of Excellence can start with just one person. It doesn't need to be a team initially. However, you will find as your organization adopts Power Platform and other platforms as well, this team is going to grow. You're going to have more people. You might separate these people into different groups. You might have the Center of Excellence Power Platform team, might have the Center of Excellence automation team, and so on. There are 4 main steps to establishing a Center of Excellence. So the first step is secure. This is where you establish your environment strategy, apply security and DLP policies as well, and also manage your licenses. Then you move into the evangelize phase. This is where you provide your communication space and also learning material so that you can uplift your organization internally. You then move on to your monitor phase. This is where you install the COE starter kit, or you might even reach out. So we partner with Rencore as well, and you might even look at using that to monitor your platforms, as Rencore doesn't just monitor the Power Platform, but also all of Microsoft 365. You want to make sure that you're identifying patterns, seeing who your champions are, so that when you go into the nurture phase, you can maybe move these champions into their own environment where they're more flexible to do things. You know, they've had their maybe they've been Microsoft certified. Maybe they've gone through the learning material you provided, and you think they're suitable to go into their own environment where they might be able to do more things and connect with different services as well. And in this nurture phase is where you also want to, as I said before, create app in a day events, hackathons to make sure that your organization is increasing the knowledge base internally. So the first phase, secure. As I said, when you establish your Center of Excellence, this can begin with one organization. However, it will depend on your organization size. So here are some examples of teams or how you could separate your Center of Excellence. If you are in a bigger organization, you might have a low-code team, Power Platform team, like the admin side, then the nurture side as well. So they organize your training, events, and so on, and then also a support team. So that when business users need help, they can reach out to this support team. You also want to make sure you receive executive sponsorship. So if you don't have any C-level sponsorship within the organization, you will find that the platform will not grow. So I think that is one of the most important points in this step. And you also want to diversify your team. So not just IT people. In the past, IT have always made decisions. You want to try and diversify this as much as possible. Next, you want to establish your environment strategy. So what is an environment strategy? Why do you need it? Essentially, you want to make sure that you have a strategy so that when someone comes with an idea or a solution, you know exactly where you're going to put that application or solution. So, for example, on the Power Platform, there are different types or different scenarios where you would create a new environment. You might create a new environment for your business department. You might create a new environment for your ALM scenarios, so where you have a development, test, and production environment. You might even have a new environment for a different geographical location, and so on. So you want to make sure that you establish this strategy, know when or in what case will this solution go into this environment, or when should a new environment be created, and so on. Now, the default environment. This is one of the most tricky environments and one we get a lot of questions about because you can't do much with it. Microsoft have done this on purpose. So there's no way to block users from creating apps. And every user has permission to create apps as well. Typically, what you want to do with the default environment, you would want to rename it so that you name it personal productivity. So you make sure users understand what this environment is going to be used for. And it's typically used for first-party integrations and personal productivity scenarios. So if they want to make a to-do app for themselves, if they want to create a application to replace the form in SharePoint, this is where the default environment would be used. And this is where most of your effort's going to be inputted into. Maintaining this environment, making sure users are creating apps that belong in the correct environment and aren't just going straight to this default environment. The first environment, if you don't have it already, I suggest you create is the Power User environment. And this is going to be for your champions. So with the default environment, you want to lock it down as much as possible. You want to set up DLP policies that prevent users from connecting to applications such as trying to think of an application off the top of my head. Well, non-Microsoft applications. So you don't want them to connect to them in the default environment, but you might allow power users to do that. So you might allow them to maybe connect to SQL Server, but you might lock that down in the default environment. Those are some scenarios where this environment becomes important. And it also encourages those users who are creating apps to make sure they go through your organization's learning material to uplift their own knowledge. And so that they have that more freedom within the organization and they understand what they're doing. So some considerations as well, make sure you clearly document this. This can be done within SharePoint, for example, but just make sure that your organization's employees know exactly what this environment's being used for. As I said before, custom environments, this is where you can create environments for your department level scenarios or your ALM scenarios as well. And this is an example environment strategy that Microsoft provides. So as Peter said, these slides will be available after this webinar, and you'll be able to find it, well, the video recording as well, so you can refer to this. But this is an example environment strategy from Microsoft. And these are some scenarios as well as to when an application should go in its own environment or be moved around, so on and so forth. When you create DLP policies, I recommend you don't begin immediately. I would firstly do an assessment of your platform and where it currently is, what connectors are currently being used within your default environment before you start to lock it down. There might be some applications that are being used by business units that might be quite critical, that are sitting in that default environment before you begin to lock it down. So make sure you analyze what's currently being used and what business units are doing what within this environment, and then begin to clean it up slowly and introduce more DLP policies as you go. Here is an example of a tenant's DLP policies. So obviously they have their most restrictive DLP policy for the default environment, and then they make DLP policies depending on the requirements of every other environment and exclude it from that default policy. In this secure phase, you also want to make sure you have a license assignment strategy. With most organizations, this is already in place. However, it's just something to take note of. Make sure that you know how licenses are being assigned within your organization. Make sure you have a plan, whether they'll be manually done, whether there's an approval process, and so on and so forth. But that's just something to keep in mind. Also, the most important part, I think, and it's very, very undervalued, is making sure you have a business value measure. So this could be a form or some form of way of making sure you know what the return on investment is for a particular solution. If you go forward and get professional development done for a Power Platform solution, Make sure that you can justify it. So make sure you can say, this is the amount of time it takes before this solution is going to be implemented. This is the amount of time it's going to take after the solution has been implemented. So you can calculate that return on investment. Otherwise, there's no point trying to digitalize things if you don't know what you're getting out of the platform, what you're getting out of the solution itself. Next, we move into the evangelize phase. So this is where you create your Yammer or Teams communication channel. So where your users can communicate with each other, ask questions with other experts within the organization. And you also want to create a Power Platform wiki. There is a Power Platform wiki template, I should say, a SharePoint template, provided by Microsoft that you can download and install yourselves. And it comes with a lot of things out of the box. So I do have a quick demo. No, I don't. But I can provide that for you afterwards as a link to documentation as to where you can find that. Setting up communication channels. Make sure you let your users know how you're going to train them, what events are coming up, and so on. This is typically done or comes out of the box in this SharePoint template provided by Microsoft. Now, one thing that I always like to tell people whenever I talk about Power Platform governance is 5 to 10 years ago, employees used to always, or everyone, I would say, used to say Word and Excel skills on their resume. Now Microsoft bring out all these new products and employees are just assumed they understand how to use it and how to automate a lot of this stuff, and they don't. So you need to make sure they're being upskilled and understand what it is, what it can be used for, and also the power of it as well. So this is where you go into the monitor phase. So here you can install the Center of Excellence Starter Kit. The Center of Excellence Starter Kit is free and comes from Microsoft. And it covers just the Power Platform. So it doesn't cover Power BI because of the slightly different architecture surrounding Power BI. But it does mean you can report on your Power Automate flows, your Power Apps, and so on, who's making what. You can get some pretty good visuals out of it. The only thing that will cost you is to get the license to run the Center of Excellence Starter Kit automations. But apart from that, it is free. There are more tools that come out of the Center of Excellence Starter Kit, some of which do require premium licensing. So a lot of organizations tend to not use a lot of those tools and applications, but they are there available for you if you do want to pursue that. We did partner with Rencore. So this is a SaaS solution, and the reason is because it covers all of Microsoft 365 and not just Power Platform. Now, the issue with the starter kit is that if you want to extend it, you will require the knowledge and also the skill set to be able to implement, for example, or integrate Power BI into the starter kit. So you want to make sure that, this is where Rencore comes in. So it has a lot of things out of the box policies. It has a simple automation builder that you can use so that when a policy is violated, an automation occurs or an email is sent and so on and so forth. Finally, you go into your support. And this is where you want to automate your learning. So if a user wants to create a new environment, what is the process that they're going to use to create this new environment? If they want to create a new application, don't know where the environment belongs, how do they communicate this and how do they get help to discuss where it goes? You also want to make sure that all the learning material is communicated as well. And you're communicating these new events that are coming up as well. So this is a quick overview over Power Platform governance. As I said, I did do a webinar recently with ACS that goes a little more in depth into each of these topics. But I will hand it back over to Peter for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Just sharing screen again. Thank you very much. A lot of content. Yeah, the questions. So there were questions in the chat already, and I have answered almost all of them. But we can repeat a question from Don, because he wanted to know, let me just scroll up. He wanted to know, what's his question? Are the Microsoft Learning portal pages you are showing the standard Microsoft ones, or are they tailored by yourselves? So he's referring to my content about the maturity models, and everything I showed was standard Microsoft stuff. And I've already answered in the chat, but I want to repeat it here for the video. That we are working on a SaaS application, SaaS solution for implementation of maturity models, where we will have model templates, tailoring templates, and we will have action set templates. So we also will include the actual actions that you need to implement, or that you need to implement the capabilities. This will all be part of it. So what I have showed is standard, but we are working on a solution. And then we had another question from Azra. Can you send the wiki link, please? Is she referring to something?
Yeah, so that's the SharePoint Knowledge Hub, and I've just set that in chat as well.
Okay, yeah, I see it. Okay, we are adding the link to the video and to the email we are sending around with all the other links, so everyone will get the link. And then we had another question: are there tools for the workshop? So that was a question for me about tool support. So I want to show you again the Microsoft model for the maturity model for Microsoft 365, and in the overview, on the overview page, we have this tools and samples. Get started. So we click here, we get to this page about how to run maturity model for Microsoft 365 workshop. So it describes how to run a workshop, gives a few tips. And at the end, there are a few links to actual tools. A quick assessment, maybe I show quick assessment. So those are Excel tools that you can use in your workshop, in your workshops to assess levels of maturity here. So you see here we have all the competencies here, and you can like add a few numbers. I can't do it here in the browser. I would have to copy it and then do it in Excel, but that's what it does. And it has a dashboard. It shows a few diagrams. And then we have another question: how can we measure the success of our automation? I think that's for Michael. Michael, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, of course, I'd love to touch on that. I'd say I'll probably start with establishing the center of excellence. That's really quite key. As Ryan said, you can even start with one person or one person, and then you can expand out. So once you have the automation center of excellence, then you can start implementing these tools. So I know a really good one. It's also provided by Microsoft. It's called Automation Kit. Essentially, you can install this tool into your Power Platform, and then you can use this tool to kind of give you an overview of your key metrics. So, for instance, you can see many return on investments. You can see key metrics like your success of your automation flows, any errors that may occur, and then you can use all this data to kind of analyze and refine your automations going forward. So I would suggest, Center of Excellence is a really good start, and then you can implement these free tools like Automation Kit into your Power Platform. If you also need any help implementing any of these tools, or like assessing your current procedures, business procedures you might have, feel free to reach out to us, as we also provide RPA assessments, automation assessments, and the like there also. So yes, we'll send all these links referring to these tools after the webinar, as Peter said. Should give you a good overview till we get started.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I think that's it with the questions. So thank you very much. We'll be sharing the links, as I said, to the video and the slides and all the links that we had in the presentations in the next 1 or 2 days, and we'll announce the next webinar shortly. So thank you to everybody for taking the time. I hope you could take something new away from this event. I wish you a nice rest of the week, and I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.